We are just about ready to get started. I'm pretty sure folks who are calling in, you are not able to turn your videos on, which I apologize for. That is something that I will fix before our next one. But Ziggy, I did make you a co-host, so you should be good to go on that. I think we have just about everybody that, we might have others roll in. We are opening these meetings to the public moving forward. And so for that reason, that is why we have this webinar set up. I would like to take roll call before we get started. So I'll go ahead and do that now. You should be able to unmute and say here when I call your name. So Mac McCullough.
Here.
Great. Angela Stewart. I don't think we have Angela. Kathy Zenda Wilson.
Here.
Thank you, Kathy. Jim Hodsma. Don't have him today, but we do have Paul Egnatuk.
Here.
Great. Lee Adams. I don't think we have Lee today. Mark Newman. Mark Newman is joining us from Albion College. He's new, and I don't see him here, but we will get him onboarded soon enough. Sonia Elder.
I'm here.
Thank you, Sonia. Dr. Paul Watson, not seeing him right this moment, but he might join us later. We are in the process of finding county commissioners to join us, just so you know. We will do like the process of getting commissioners onto committees very soon, and we will identify some. Lori Upright.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Paulette Porter, not seeing Paulette today. Barry Scott, not seeing Barry today. Art Kale, Jeff Alba, Shadi, not seeing Shadi. Oh, we have a couple people over here that we will bring in. We'll give Mike Knopf a minute. Derek Perry.
I'm here.
Thanks, Derek. So Derek is the city manager of Marshall. He'll be joining us from now on. Haley Snyder.
Here.
Hi, Haley. Thank you for joining us. Robert Stalin, he wasn't able to join us today, but he will be joining us in the future. Mike Knopf.
I am just joining. Yep.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Let's see. And then for staff, we have Kelly Scott.
Hi there. Good afternoon.
Lucy and Lynn. Lynn, if you're able. Hi. Brent here in the room. David Hackett here in the room. Erin Cummings.
I'm here.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for joining us. Everybody, Erin is from the road department. She'll be joining us moving forward. And then for our consultants, we have Mike Watsa.
Here.
Hi, Mike. Caitlin.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Caitlin. And then Ziggy. Yeah,
Hello.
Hi, Ziggy. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, and we have one more joining us. Let's add Art into the room.
Angela Stewart did too.
All right, let's give Art a minute to join. Takes a minute to become a panelist. I know that. All right. So on today's agenda, we are primarily going to hear from Ziggy and have an update on the report and the executive summary report, which we did send to everyone ahead of time. If we have time afterwards, I can give an update on the RFP, which was issued. But I will just go ahead and hand it over to you, Ziggy, if you're ready.
All right, thank you so much. Feel free to yell out during the presentation. When I'm presenting, it's hard for me to see when people have a hand up because I don't always get to see the full picture. But so just say you have a question and I'll be happy to stop and listen, and I will make enough time available for plenty of discussion afterwards. Okay. So let's see if I can do this right. Can everybody see the presentation?
No, we can't see it yet.
Okay. Shared screen, let's see. Oh, let's do this.
There it is. Oh, we see your calendar. Oh, now we see it.
Okay. Hopefully this should work. All right, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the executive summary and the report. The full report should follow within a couple of days, and so that will be available. Okay, findings. Approximately 8,200 unserved and 2,300 underserved locations in the county, with some heavy caveats. One of the things that we sort of have a legacy of is the FCC's notoriously poor maps that at the time of the beginning of this project, what was available. We use that as a starting point, and we get stakeholder input and talk with ISPs and others. And based on that, we then do some targeted inspections to see what outside plant is actually available, and if we can see that there is service or not. And so we use that to refine the maps. That being said, this is, and then based on those, we have these polygons, and we map addresses into them to get an estimate of how many unserved and underserved there are. Because of the way the FCC reports it, we do expect this to be a very conservative number, and it's quite possible that there are more than this. FCC is working right now on better maps. The first iteration came out, and there is a challenge process underway where first ISPs, then governments, and now regular citizens can look up at the address level, zoom in for their address and go, and no, it's not served, and yes, it's served, or we're not getting this kind of service, that's not speeds we can get here, etc. That is used as input. The FCC will make another map available maybe in a couple of months. An NTIA is using this process to develop its own maps and do allocations to states for the IIJA BEAD funds for the massive amount of money that will flow to different states. Then the states will use that, and we can talk about that later, will use that to design a grant program to distribute those funds. That's even with those pretty large areas not colored that have no service of at least 25.3. There are plenty of areas in the county that have only a single broadband provider. And broadband is defined as at minimum 25 megabit per second download speeds and 3 megabit per second upload speeds. That's just the minimal. NTIA has set 100/20 as a reasonable target for adequate broadband, and ideally you'll have faster than that. So lots of the areas that has no functional competition, which can of course lead to higher prices. Based on our discussions with with the task force and other stakeholders, we developed 3 cost models, which also reflects different ways of approaching this problem. One is a countywide network. That means building everywhere, including where there is currently infrastructure. The second model is to focus only on the unserved and underserved locations. And then finally, the third one is to look at a very limited case, which can be, approached if desirable in conjunction with either of the 2 first models, which looks at a middle mile network that focuses on connecting county government sites. And we did a conceptual design for 10 county sites to see how much that would cost. And we used that to then evaluate whether that could potentially contribute as an added infrastructure that could incentivize getting expanding out into the unserved and underserved areas. So model 1, this is building everywhere is that is it's a model that's suited for jurisdictions that want to have an open access model where any ISP can make use of that infrastructure to provide last mile services. We have a few examples of open access models. They tend to work especially in denser urban areas, but there are also some examples of a mixture of urban and suburban and some other models for that. Having an open access model and having the county own the infrastructure gives you the maximum leverage to determine what would be appropriate subscription price and incorporating any other policy priorities on quality, on policies like not discriminating or having no preference for content, etc., and not throttling, no data caps, all kinds of things can be used when you own the infrastructure. There may be some cost sharing possible if entering into an arrangement with a private partner. We do have examples of that. And our cost estimate for that is somewhere around $360 million for this kind of very comprehensive approach. Model 2 is one that focuses on unserved and underserved locations. That is one of the advantages of that model is that there's plenty of grant funds available for at least the unserved and possibly the underserved locations. It works well if you want to work with one or more private partner. You can do a multi-award situation, and you can optimize for the most cost-effective proposals for a specific area. And incumbents that are close to an area usually and already have, for example, pole attachment agreements can usually expand at a lower cost than others, but sometimes you have a smaller provider that's very nimble and can have a very cost-effective proposal. And so you can do divide and conquer approach. It's because it's very targeted to unserved and underserved in predominantly very rural, sparsely inhabited areas. It's not really, you don't have the scale that allows you to put a lot of pressure on subscription prices in the county as a whole. So if one of the things you want to do is try to tackle high subscription rates that are scaring off residents to sign up or forcing them into a less than adequate service tier. Infrastructure built in unserved areas is probably not the way to do that, but would have to be tackled in parallel. And for that infrastructure, we are estimating approximately 120 million. And these are estimates. They really reflect a range, and there are a lot of different scenarios that go into this, and actual costs are going to be different. So it's quite possible that when you have an actual bid situation, you get very different responses, because bidders take into account not just what their actual costs are, but what are the revenue potential and how quickly do they need to break even. And then finally, the middle mile network. The infrastructure could be justified on a number of different criteria. It can be undertaken in order to secure future bandwidth needs, or it's possible that it could be cost effective over a very long run. So while it obviously has a high capital costs, there may be avoidance in recurring lease costs that over a 10-year period may or may not sort of break even. And then there's also other reasons such as security and resilience that mandate having your own infrastructure, and there are certain jurisdictions that make that a priority purely on those grounds. You can leverage this. Having extra strands costs almost nothing once you've already put scoped in to dig up the ground and do the labor. So because that added cost is fairly minimal, there's plenty of excess capacity that can be utilized for private ISPs to get to areas that otherwise they would have to build their own infrastructure or lease. Once we did the design, we figured that the impact would be fairly limited because there's already infrastructure in much of that design area. So in order to have some impact, you'd have to price it below market rate. And you would probably still only have some of the smaller ISPs be interested in that. And our cost estimate is that it will be somewhere around 3.3 million for that middle mile infrastructure. We did a survey and to figure out what are some of the barriers for adoption, and one of the biggest ones was affordability. These findings right here you see are for those residents who said that they did not subscribe to internet service, and then the follow-up question was why not, and they had a range of options, and a very large percentage of those said that they simply consider it too expensive. So affordability is definitely an issue here. As you probably know, the federal government, the FCC, makes broadband discounts available under the Affordable Connectivity Program. You have to be eligible, although there are a variety of different criteria for eligibility that are fairly generous. And if you qualify, you can get up to $30 off in monthly subscription costs, which will go not to you, but will go to the ISP. So the ISP will verify that you are indeed eligible, and then they'll provide your name and address to FCC, and they'll get a reimbursement. A lot of ISPs really like this. You have a single payer, right? Instead of having the overhead of managing thousands of different subscribers. Our analysis shows that it's underutilized. Only about a third of actual eligible households currently currently are registered for Affordable Connectivity Program discount. So there is a potential here to have some impact by intervening. So that gets us to the recommendations. One of them, we've made these findings and recommendations, the main ones available before, because we knew the timing was of the essence. So the task force already had some of those available, and the RFP that it released is one of those actions that the county has acted on. The RFP is structured in a flexible format. Once the results are available, we're hoping to get a variety of different projects, and we're hoping that some will also consider the entire county and what that would cost, and also identify some areas that they would be particularly happy to target, where they might be especially cost effective. What this gets is a it's an RFI and STIR. It's a market sounding mechanism. So apart from the fact that you can use it to target a specific small project, and then also select some potential partners for when the BEAD funds are available, or at least having preferred partners identified, it also gives you a lot of critical information about what it might cost for specific areas in kind of real life, and use that for planning purposes. And this is a mechanism where if the more leverage the county gets, the more it can require, and certainly if the county is able to require future-proof technology like fiber, and both because of its own priorities and the need to be sustainable, but also because the grant sources that are available lean towards fiber anyway. A comprehensive approach at an RFP can also help the county select projects and implement what its priorities in such a way that there's no cherry picking, that you don't get ISPs that basically compete for the same few spots where there's a relatively high density and leave the most difficult areas out of the equation. One of the possibilities of going with this approach is to take a small project and select a partner. This is also a way to signal to the market here being ISPs wanting to provide services, to signal that you mean business, that you intend to do something and you are proactive about it, and that makes it more likely that they will participate in future engagements. Targeting areas where that adjoins unserved areas that adjoins others, both served that only have a single provider, or underserved where grant funding may not be available to solve at least most of the problem there, allows you to strategically identify areas where the selected partner can introduce some competition in those adjoining areas. So I mentioned a comprehensive approach. The BEAD funds that have become available would take care of a significant portion of the county's unserved areas. We don't know yet and we will not know for sure until NTA makes the allocations available to the states. And we know from NTI's map which areas are considered high cost and which are go under sort of our regular construction locations, because there are different amounts of grant funding would be available for those. And so the state will know only then how far its budget can extend and whether it'll have enough to tackle all the unserved areas. And if so, how much of the underserved areas it can solve as well. And as I said, using a comprehensive approach allows you to strategically also try to help identify project areas that include underserved locations. The requirement indeed is that at least a project area is considered unserved if at least 80% of the locations aren't served, but that leaves 20% that could be underserved, for example. So, and to tackle the issue of affordability, we're recommending that, and the task force have already well underway doing this, but promoting ACP outreach efforts and to promote adoption. And there are a variety of different ways to do that. One is to work with key stakeholders, and also ISP partner or partners, to have information campaigns, to streamline the process, to have assistance with sign up. The process can sometimes be difficult and confusing, and then apply for upcoming funding. So part of what the state is doing is doing a plan both for the infrastructure part, that's the BEAD funds, and also for digital equity. And the outcome of both of those efforts, amongst other things, are the designed grant programs. So there will be a grant program for digital equity, and working with identified partner organizations to target those funds can help in ACP and affordability outreach as well. And then, of course, working with the ISPs to encourage enrollment. A lot of ISPs, as I mentioned, are happy with the ACP program, and would welcome an opportunity to enter into some partnerships for joint marketing and information campaigns, to work with, if you have digital navigator programs, people who volunteer to help sign folks up, to work with them, and to during the process, if there are problems, give them those contact numbers or put them in contact with them, etc. Because the strategy that you're able to adopt is so heavily dependent on the upcoming grant programs that will be designed by the state based on input from localities. It's very important that you stay in contact with the Michigan High-Speed Internet Office. And there are some questions that they can help answer, and they probably don't have the answers right now, but this is what they're working towards. How will the county's input be incorporated? In order for the county to have meaningful partnerships where it can actually get something in return, some collaboration or affordability or other goodies in exchange for support. That support has to mean something and add something for the ISP, so they're more likely to get those grant funds. So is the state going to consider that, and how will it be structured? Will there be a requirement for any ISP to get local government support and specifically county support? Or will it just be you get higher scoring if you have some kind of support? And what would support look like? Would it have to be a formal partnership agreement, some kind of MOU? Or is a letter of support enough? And is one option worth more points than the other? And in general, what's the scoring criteria going to be? There are some things that are mandated by NTIA, but the NTIA doesn't go out and say you need to put 20% scoring on speed, for example. It only lists some criteria that should be more important than others, but leaves the specific design up to the state. And then what are the state's projections for how far the funds will go to solve the unserved and underserved areas problems? And does the state have any plans regarding community anchors? The NTA makes a big deal about mentioning those. It does allow for BEAD funds to be used for connecting community anchors, although with the stipulation that the state must prefer unserved and then underserved areas before tackling community anchors. But there are ways to add that in by, for example, adding a few points if you include connectivity to community anchors in your proposal. So, but will the state have a plan or not? Okay, next steps. Of course, we're awaiting the RFP responses. We're selecting a partner for a small project based on those responses. And there's, in order to make it even more competitive, a lot depends on where and how those responses are. But if there are opportunities for different alternatives to target, the best and final offer process usually produces the most cost-effective and best arrangement from the county's perspective. And then having those responses will then allow you to lay out a more comprehensive strategy for which areas to potentially target first and how. Of course, with the caveat that a lot will depend on how the state designs its grant program. But this will give you some intelligence as to what are the costs and what are the options, where will it be competitive, where will it not be competitive, etc. That's it.
Awesome.
Ready
Thank
for
you.
questions?
What questions do folks have? I wrote down a handful of things I wanted to mention. As Nikki mentioned, we did issue the RFP, and we've had quite a bit of response from it from internet service providers, and so we're working through that process. One of the things that ISPs can submit questions, and so we do have a lot of questions coming in that we're responding to on the platform that we do our vendor registry with. Mac, did you want to go ahead, do your questions?
Yeah, just I should know this, but what is the cost right now of 25.3 service? Is it about $60 a month?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. A lot actually depends on the ISP and the technology. So AT&T, for example, adopts a pricing policy that basically defines products regardless of the underlying technology. So it could be $60 for a crappy DSL and $60 for fiber.
Yeah.
So it's an example of sort of how inequality gets kind of spread out. But yes, $60 is
And sort of baked in. I mean, the reason I'm asking, I mean, when you think about why people don't, enroll in ACPs, $30 a month for 25.3 is no bargain.
correct.
And the other side of that is one of the challenges that we face, with adoption and everything else, is that people don't know they're being left behind until they find themselves woefully behind.
Yeah,
They don't know that they can't get medical appointments until they need them, right? Or they don't know that they need broadband to apply for jobs until they do. They don't need, so I mean, we have those two things going against us. If you don't know that you need it now, why would you opt in
correct.
to spend $30 a month, which is going to double in a year's time, or whatever the length of the thing is. And I guess the other thing is just how realistic is it that we can really leverage competition in areas where our behemoth in Calhoun County, Xfinity, where they already, is there really room to insert competition into those areas?
So we see a lot of fiber providers, especially both small and regional ones, finding the prospect of competition with Comcast to be very attractive, because they think that they can easily beat out Comcast in customer service and speed. And so there's a window of opportunity. I don't know that Comcast necessarily is planning to beef up its customer service dramatically, but we do know they have accelerated plans for upgrades in their current technology that will allow them to do symmetric speeds, which currently they can't do. So they can do like 1.2 gigs download and 35 megabit per second upload, which is not great if you have to, even today, forget about the future, but even today, if you have to have multiple Zoom sessions, your kids with school and or doing homework that requires interactive communications, and parents also working remotely or doing telehealth, etc. Having multiple sessions already requires much more bandwidth than what is typically available. So, and Comcast knows this. This is why they are so aggressive now in trying to upgrade their infrastructure.
Sure.
But the issue is, for the county, of course, is you don't have anything on paper. You don't have an agreement from them. You don't have a timeline. You don't have assurances. Yeah.
Ziggy, one question that came up on our end was we were looking at your maps, and you have the map that shows competition where we only have one, we don't have a ton of competition in some areas. Where was that data found? Is that FCC data?
That is FCC data.
Okay.
That data is although it's possible to generate those maps today with the new FCC data, it's a little bit more clunky to do it. It's was readily available at the census block level from the FCC.
Yep, that makes sense. Any other questions or comments about the report?
Quite a range.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And I think one of the things, the RFP really is going to be the process through which we understand what ISPs are thinking of. I think we'll have a better sense of how they would like to work with us, and then we'll be able to just have, as Ziggy was saying, it's like our market study. It's our way of really understanding what the ISPs are thinking. And so that is a major next step. The other one, especially about the maps and wanting to get the maps to be as accurate as possible, especially as the county has dug into doing bulk challenges of the FCC data. We're really finding that individual challenges are the best route. It's hard for us to really have a sense of what availability really is with just crowdsourced data. And so, yeah, I think ultimately, we're really going to keep pushing the individual challenges and see what we can do with that.
Yes, thank you for mentioning the challenges. They're very important, and I meant to raise that as well. Although it won't affect the allocation the state will receive from NTIA at this point, it is, of course, important for the county to make sure that all unserved areas are captured so that they become eligible for the grant funding that will become available.
Absolutely. And that actually leads really well into Caitlin's question, which is in the chat, which is, can we clarify on the RFP, is it for unserved and underserved areas across the county? Ultimately, what we left it open. We left it open in a couple different ways. We did specify unserved and underserved, and the reason why we specified that was because that is where the grant money is going. And so we want to make sure that we're identifying those areas, which is related to the maps themselves, but then also with ISPs, we're looking at how do we tackle those areas so that we can apply for Robin and BEAD grants, because that's what that money will go towards. If there is, possibility for the county to work with folks in areas where, we know that they're underserved, but maybe they're not quite, defined underserved or unserved, that's a possibility. And I think we're open to working with ISPs in that sense as a result of the RFP process. So the RFP was fairly general. One thing I will mention too, because I know we have talked about pilot areas in the past, is that we did not put pilot areas in the RFP. We decided to leave the RFP open in general. That allows us to kind of see what the ISPs are coming back to us with. And then also, we do think that, the places we have identified as pilot areas, there's a lot of potential there. And so that potential is something that we're going to have conversations about with the RFP process. But we also know that there are townships that are eager to find solutions. So for instance, both Marshall Township and Convis Township, which both have done internet service, looking at options with Aspen Wireless in the past. They've kind of done that process similar to what Marshall City did. They looked into that process and found that it was too cost prohibitive. Both of those townships are really eager to find solutions. And so we left it open so that we can kind of really work with the ISPs to see if there's potential in not just the pilot areas that we had identified, but also maybe other parts of the county as well. Any other comments? Kelly, do you have anything that you want to add? Maybe not.
All right, sorry, it took me a second to unmute. I think, also next steps are into more of the details of the report. So, for example, when CTC, talks about a full build, I can't imagine us doing that because of the overbuild component. So because we don't know where the current fiber is, I just think that's a duplication potentially of cost and service for the county to want to build everywhere. So we need to look more into those assumptions, but similar, we need to understand the assumptions that went into, let's say, the middle mile model. Mm-hmm. And again, I think Ziggy mentioned that probably has a minimum impact, but it could be combined with, in areas where we maybe do a pilot project for the underserved and unserved. So one next step is getting more into the details of the full report, in addition to the executive summary, which you heard about today. And then we are requiring a pretty quick turnaround on the RFP because of the opportunity to choose a partner or more than one partner, if we can, to apply for the Robin funding. And the maximum per project on Robin funding is what, 20 million? Is that correct?
I have it right here.
Yeah, I think that's correct, if I remember right.
30 million for a single project
30.
and 60 million for a single applicant across multiple projects.
Yeah, so clearly that would be some sort of pilot project, but that's the first thing coming up with applications potentially due the beginning of March. So we will need to formulate some sort of negotiations with what we get back from the RFP and be working on our first grant application. So over the next couple months, this will start to take a lot more shape.
Lucy, if I can offer a couple thoughts.
Sure, please, Mike.
Ziggy, it would be correct that the 360 million, for instance, and the 120 probably as well. Those figures are exclusive of whatever grant money might be available to the extent that they cover unserved and underserved areas. Is that correct?
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, the ideal scenario would be that there's plenty of funds to tackle both unserved and underserved areas. And the ISPs will come up with those matches and there's no cost to the county. I mean, that's the ideal.
Right.
It's unlikely to be 100%, but the county is unlikely to have to come up with anything near those numbers if what they're interested in is incentivizing private partners to solve the problem.
And with respect to project partners, one of the problems we have, as you've heard, the decades of lousy maps, is that when you bring in a partner, whether it's, and I don't even want to name names, but we all know who they are, the big ISPs, when they get involved, and if they get involved through the RFP process, they will bring with them the data that they hold in their pocket very closely, and whether they even share with us or not explicitly, when we see what they propose, built into that will be, oh, and they must have fiber here, there, and we're not, because that, they're not pricing that too highly. But anyway, so once we start to partner up with somebody, if we go that way, we will necessarily receive some of the information we just can't get at right now. And then my last point was that the Inflation Reduction Act did have a provision in it, and Caitlin's going to be sending you all something about this, that reduced some of the concerns about mixing and matching funds from different funding sources like ARPA and BEAD. So that was a good thing, buried in the middle of that huge bill. That's it. Thanks. Nicely done, Ziggy, as always.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and it's funny because of the questions that we've received, we have had 2 ISPs ask for our data, and it was AT&T and Comcast. So go figure. And one of the other things I wanted to mention was just that our RFP ends on February 2nd. So that is coming up. And definitely we're thinking about the Robin dates. As Ziggy mentioned, keeping connection with MyHigh, we have reached out to them, especially related to, most recently we reached out regarding the maps. MyHigh provided some data to us based on the infrastructure audit that they've done in the state. However, when our glorious GIS department pulled it into a map, it was and we knew this. We knew that MyHigh was only traveling certain areas of the state. And that became very clear in the data that they sent us, which was, it basically went down like 3 main thoroughfares and tracked what they could find of fiber, but it doesn't tell us anything else about, the other areas of the county. So we've reached out to MyHigh to kind of understand how they anticipate we would use this data. Right now, we just don't have reliable data to do a solid availability challenge. And so and it's interesting because we are also participating, both GIS and Lynn Meikle are participating in statewide calls about the specific issue of challenging the availability maps through the FCC, and everybody's a little flabbergasted. So it's definitely a process. It's really interesting. One of the other things that happened with MyHigh recently was that we did reach out or talk to Connected Michigan, which is where Eric Frederick worked before he moved to My High. And on that, the Connected Michigan is helping the My High office set up their listening sessions. They are doing listening sessions throughout the state. And as a part of that, we actually have arranged, or they've agreed that they're going to do a listening session in Battle Creek. So we will be helping with that. We're already trying to help them get a location for that, and that should be announced. I believe they're planning on doing it in late February. So we'll definitely make sure everybody on the task force is aware of that, because it's in our community. I think it would be good if we could show up. They also have all your contact information, so they'll probably send you an invite as well. But just so you know, that's definitely coming, and that's another great opportunity for us to connect with My High and even to ask some of these questions that this report has identified.
Well, and Lucy, the value of their listening sessions is because they're charged with designing how to distribute the money they're getting from the federal government, right? They have to build a grant program. So I think that's why they're trying to listen to individual communities and get input, so that they're designing the best process they can for granting those funds.
Yes.
NTA developed a long list of requirements and recommendations on how to consult and who to consult with. And there's a very long list of organizations and sectors that the state is required to consult with. But what does consult mean? You know, that's left up to the states to determine. It could be a webinar,
Right.
or it could be actually working together to come up with solutions.
We hope so. Great. Any other questions or comments? Well, we appreciate everybody for joining us today. And Ziggy, thank you for your presentation about this. We are still working with CTC. We're going to be working on getting that final report done, and then that's what we'll be sharing with the public and with commissioners as well. But I wanted to make sure that we went over this executive summary with everybody. You know, in addition to the RFP and thinking about Robin and thinking about, you know, plans for the county, we also are thinking about ACP and education around ACP, which we will be working on so that we can provide our partners with materials that they can use for marketing about ACP. There's definitely an appetite for that. But ultimately, you know, I think we're really seeing this, especially with the RFP, these conversations are going to be continuing. And so we really want to work with our partner institutions that are on this call towards finding solutions and finding ways that we can increase connectivity in Calhoun. So definitely, you know, if this inspires you in any way, let us know. We are eager to work together, and we'll be in touch as well. Any final comments before we wrap this up? All right. Thank you all for joining us.